College football week 2 was full of great matchups. Some of them didn't pan out as well. We had some blowouts in a couple of the big matchup games that we were excited about this weekend. But regardless, good weekend of college football. To review some of the games, teams like Kansas State and Oklahoma State, they handled. West Virginia handled. They're playing. There's a lot of teams that are playing smaller schools this week. Wisconsin was playing Florida Atlantic. They handled. Michigan was playing Cincinnati. Michigan really didn't look that dominated, and they did win the game 36-14, but they really didn't look that dominating. Keep an eye on them. They're ranked very high. I think they're 7 now with the win to Florida and then this win, but I don't look at them as a number 7 team right now. They're a little bit farther back than that. They need to prove a little bit more to me before I can put them that high. Louisville, again, Louisville played a game where if they didn't have Lamar Jackson, I don't think they would have won this game. More and more each week it's showing how important Lamar Jackson is to the offense, to the entire lineup. And then this next week they have a huge test against Clemson. Alabama, they handled against Fresno State. TCU, really, the real question was, can TCU beat Arkansas in the trenches? On the defensive line, on the offensive line. Arkansas usually wins those battles against most teams, even teams in the SEC. And TCU was able to handle them. Kenny Hill kept control of the ball. The score was 28-7. If you didn't watch this game, you would have thought TCU killed them. It was 14-7 real late. It was honestly a pretty good game. Bad field goal kicking by Arkansas. Really probably would have had a chance at the end of this game if they would have made the two 20-yard field goals that they missed during the game. Penn State got on top of Pitt real early and just kind of stayed on the neck the whole game. Max Brown and Pitt, it looked like they were kind of scared at first, or like they were a little bit overwhelmed. And then, once the game started going, Pitt started to play a little bit better. I see Pitt playing better this next week against Oklahoma State, not playing with as much nervousness, not thinking, okay, we're undefeated anymore. Now they've kind of gone through, they've played a team, they're 1-1. They've got a little bit of a blemish on their record now. I think they're ready to come in and play against Oklahoma State. Virginia Tech shut out Delaware, good win from them. Tennessee beat Indiana State. Some of the good games this week. Auburn and Clemson, just an old school defensive. Just every time you looked up, it was a 3-and-out. A 3-and-out here, a 3-and-out there, another 3-and-out. Jared Stidham getting sacked. The offensive line couldn't take care of Stidham. At the first of the game, Auburn did a great job of just running Petway and getting it to Cameron Petway and just letting him just bust up that defensive line. The game plan at the first of the game looked very good for Auburn. I really thought Auburn would be able to sustain the momentum that they developed in the first quarter. They basically had the ball the entire first quarter. Clemson scored on the last possession of the first half when Kelly Bryant came back in. I don't think Kelly Bryant should have came back in and been able to play this game. It clearly looked like he had a concussion. He looked very concussed. And he came back in and he looked fine. So that's what's good. He did look fine when he came back in, but I didn't think Clemson should allowed to have had Kelly Bryant come back in, just with all the concussion things that are going on. But he did come in. They scored a touchdown on the first possession, or the last possession of the first half, first possession of the second half, and they were able to win 14-6. Clemson's defense is monstrous. Real good game between Clemson and Louisville next week. Georgia and Notre Dame. This was probably, honestly, out of the 4 big games of the night, at 6 o'clock, 4 big games started, or around then. And I think Georgia Notre Dame was by far the best game of all. Something that's very not talked about a lot. Notre Dame, their presentation, on NBC is tremendous. When you're watching this Georgia Notre Dame game, I know it's 2 pretty big teams, but I was watching Auburn and Clemson. I'm watching Oklahoma and Ohio State, and nothing felt as big or as big of a game than the Georgia Notre Dame game. Just the presentation of it. NBC does a great job of that, but it was a great game regardless. Georgia won the game late. Fromm did not play particularly well, But this was a very defensive game, a punt it that way, punt it this way, who can make the field goals, and Georgia ended up winning by 1. I think the real difference here in this game was the touchdown by Terry Godwin, a huge one-handed catch in the end zone. If he wouldn't have caught it on 3rd and goal, it'd been a field goal for Georgia, and I see them losing this game 16-19 instead of winning it 20-19. So big game there. I figured Notre Dame would probably lose this game, but they're going to be right there on the cusp of the top 25. They're one of the top 25 teams. It just happens that they're 1-1 right now. LSU destroyed Chattanooga. Oklahoma, Ohio State. This is a game I really thought Oklahoma was going to go into the horseshoe and just kind of strangle themselves in a sense. They weren't going to be able to move the ball. They're going to shoot themselves in the foot. But they got it at halftime, and it was 3-3. They weathered the storm in the first half. They had a couple of bad plays in the first half where Ohio State usually can, bust it open. But, Ohio State really, in the 2 games that I've seen this year against Indiana and then against Oklahoma, they really didn't look tremendous. TJ Barrett, doesn't really look confident. He doesn't it's almost like ever since he had that injury a couple years ago against Michigan, he kind of plays almost scared, like he doesn't let it go out there. And then the game just snowballed in the second half. They kind of kept it close for a little bit. They kicked the field goal to make it 13-10, and then OU and Lincoln Riley, they picked apart Ohio's defense in the at the halftime, and they beat them with the run pass option in the second half. They just did the run pass option. They ran the ball a lot in the first half, but in the second half, instead of keeping with the run, they went to the pass option. Very huge for them. Big game for Oklahoma. Oklahoma's won 12 in a row, or maybe 13 in a row now since they lost to Ohio State last year. I look at them as the number 2 team in the nation right now, and Baker Mayfield is climbing up draft boards. It's when you look at something like where Luke Falk went and played terrible against Boise State, and you see, but Luke Falk is a physical, physically he's going to get drafted in the NFL even if he has bad stats this year because of his physique. If Baker Mayfield played the same way as Luke Falk did, you would never hear about Baker Mayfield in the NFL again. I was hearing comparisons about Brett Favre. I don't know if I don't think he's as big as Brett Favre. Can he make the throws that Brett Favre makes? Yes, he can. He can run around and make the throws. My biggest thing to take away from him was his energy. We know about his energy, but just his energy and being able to put it into a positive note, not using it as a negative, not using it as a pressure on him or his teammates. He uses it as a positive, and I really like that. And they came in and they destroyed them. I'm actually glad. If there's a team that I don't like more than Oklahoma, it's probably Ohio State. I hate both of these. I hate both these teams just since I was a kid. Being a Texas fan, and then nobody likes Ohio State. If you like Ohio State, then it's just like how were you raised? How did you become liking Ohio State? Couple other games. Or some more games from this day. Let's see here. We had the Iowa State game, which was just a barn burner. I really liked this game. Iowa State, it was a game where Iowa took a pretty big lead, then Iowa State took a pretty big lead. And then at the end, Iowa was able to come back. Real good game there. Another game that I had on my pick'em was Northwestern Duke. Northwestern had them going 10-2 at the first year. I am absolutely disgusted with Northwestern. Looking on paper, they look good, but looking at these games, they look like ass. Daniel Jones looked really good as a quarterback for Duke. We already knew he was good, but it made him look really good, picking apart that defense. Some other games to talk about from the day. Middle Tennessee beat Syracuse. I thought Middle Tennessee would play them pretty good. I didn't know if they'd win or not the way they played against Vanderbilt the week before, but Middle Tennessee was able to go into Syracuse and win that game. That was a pretty cool one. And then talk about USC, Stanford. Now, a lot of people were picking Stanford, just how physical Stanford is up front. They watched how USC played the week before, and they really thought that USC wasn't that good, or it didn't look that great that week before, and a lot of people were picking Stanford to win the game. I picked USC to win. I thought I'd kind of been with USC throughout the preseason. I thought USC would win this game, so I stuck with them. It was a good choice. Their offense was just explosive. Dontre Burnett was just all over the place. Their defense played good. Stanford played good at the first of the game. I'll give them that. They hung with it for a while, but Sam Darnett, whenever he has a big game, he just plays perfect. That's why he moved up draft boards so much last year, was just because the big games he played perfect. Like, he literally is unflappable in those big games. So that's the reason that I like him a lot. He's kind of like in the Baker Mayfield aspect of it. That's why he's touted, is because he wins big games other than his physical ability. UTSA beat Baylor. Baylor's 0-2. They've lost to two small schools 2 weeks in a row. Not starting off good for Matt Rule. Washington destroyed Montana. Real good game for Washington. They're moving up. I think they're sixth now in the polls. I've got them at like 11 still. To me, they need to beat some good teams. They beat Rutgers the week before pretty easily. And I kind of feel like they didn't beat Rutgers well enough. Rutgers just lost to Eastern Michigan last week. So there you go there. Mississippi State, this was supposed to be a close game with Louisiana Tech. They destroyed Louisiana Tech. They destroyed Louisiana Tech 57-21. A&M barely beat Nicholls State. This was a close game towards the end. A&M's not looking that hot this year. And then talk about South Carolina, Missouri. I thought South Carolina would win the game. Missouri had some turnovers. They started off the game hot, was up 10-0, and then Debo Sanders returned a kick. Then Drew Lock threw a pick. It was 14-10 before they knew it, and they couldn't score again. And then South Carolina just continued to score. South Carolina, honestly, strong on defense, looks better than I thought on offense. I honestly think that they can make some noise this year. Watch out for them. Oregon, Nebraska, this was honestly a pretty good game. Now, Oregon went up 42-14 at half, but then Oregon didn't score a point in the second half. They didn't do anything in the second half, and Nebraska just slowly kind of came back. They scored 21 points throughout the second half. Tanner Lee honestly looked pretty good. I liked what I saw out of Tanner Lee, but it wasn't enough. Oregon scored enough points in the first half to handle it, so good game from them there. Let's see, Utah, BYU. Utah won 19-13. It looks like a close game, but BYU's offense was, again, terrible. Utah was up 16-0 in the third quarter. Houston, Arizona, pretty good game here. Houston came out on top against Arizona. It was real close late, and not a lot of scoring in the second half. But they got a safety in the third, and they were up 19-10. And then, Arizona just kept kicking field goals. They couldn't get a touchdown, so they lost by 3. I think they threw a pick late. And then San Diego State, Arizona State. I thought San Diego State would win this game. Rashad Penny had a huge game. He had 216 yards on the ground, 38 through the air, 2 touchdowns. I think he returned a kickoff too. 353 all-purpose yards. You got to watch out for Rashad Penny. He's playing Stanford this week. Should be a good game between them two. Boise State, Washington State. This honestly probably might be game of the week, performance-wise. So Luke Falk played like total ass. He was missing targets. He looked like total ass. He played bad against Boise State last year too. Washington State in general played bad against Boise State last year too. They just didn't look ready. It was at Boise last year. It was in Pullman this year, so I thought they would fare a little bit better. It was 10-10 at half. Real bad offense in the first half. So both starting quarterbacks are out. Luke Falk eventually gets knocked the fuck out. He gets destroyed. Loses the ball. They go down 31-10, and Leak had already brought in Helinski for a series, but then he has to go to Helinski for the rest of the game once Falk gets hurt. So they score a TD pretty quick, and then they get a pick. They're down 24-31. They get a touchdown pretty late with about 2 minutes to go, tie at 31-31, and then in the third overtime, they're able to get a touchdown while Boise State just kicks a field goal. Really good game. I was really pulling for Washington State. Washington State's really good at losing these games that they should win, or games that aren't that big of a challenge. Both teams didn't have their starting quarterbacks. Ripken was out. Falk was out. Helinski played better than Kozart is basically what it came down to. And for this week, talk about some games from this week. The there's not that many games this week. A couple of the good games, well, not necessarily a couple of the good games, but one of the good games, Miami, Florida State, is getting postponed until October 7th with the hurricane. And then there was a couple of games this last week that were postponed, not any really big ones. And then, so to talk about the games on the 16th, or I think on the 15th, Illinois and South Florida play, or maybe it's a Thursday night game. I can't remember. But South Florida, Illinois, both teams are 2-0. South Florida, I feel like, has underachieved. They don't look as good as they were projected. And Illinois, to me, looks a little bit better than they had looked. I think this will be a closer game than you think. I'll take South Florida still. Oklahoma State versus Pittsburgh. I kind of elaborated a little bit on it earlier. I thought Pittsburgh will come out with a lot better fire than they did against Penn State last week. I'll still take Oklahoma State on the road. UCLA versus Memphis. UCLA has to go into Memphis. Memphis is an underrated team. You know, they've got a couple of NFL prospects on their team with Riley Ferguson and Andrew Miller. I like both of them. I don't know if the defense can hold up UCLA. But this is a game that it's kind of an upset alert. If Memphis could win this game, or so, they could be looking at an undefeated season later in the year if they can get past teams like Houston and South Florida. But I'll still take UCLA. I'll take UCLA to win this game. Florida versus Tennessee. Honestly, I like the Florida team better than I like the Tennessee team preseason wise. Obviously, Florida didn't play last week, so I didn't get to see a whole lot of them. Tennessee played a little bad team, so I didn't watch that game. I didn't care. And I did watch them play Georgia Tech. They really weren't that impressive against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's offense is very hard to cover, so not a very good sample size for either of these teams. You know, Florida was playing Michigan week 1 with top 10 of their players out. So this is going to be a real good game to really measure these teams. I'm going to take Florida in this game. I think I have Florida winning the SEC East, so I'm taking Florida in this game. Okay, so Middle Tennessee and Minnesota. Minnesota and PJ Fleck look really good this year. I thought they'd have a closer game with Oregon State last weekend. They won 48-14. Middle Tennessee beat Syracuse, like I said. I like Minnesota to win this game. PJ Fleck has really got him playing well. I thought he would. I knew he would. But I think Middle Tennessee State will give them hell. Purdue, Missouri. This is a game I wouldn't think that I would have put on here earlier in the year, but after I watched Purdue play Ohio and they played Louisville, and they really played good. Their offense is completely different than what it's been the last 3 or 4 years, which when I mean it's different, it's actually working now. It doesn't look stagnant. It doesn't look like a stagnant Big Ten offense of old. Missouri started hot. They scored 72 points against Southwest Missouri or Missouri State, but they really didn't play that well against South Carolina. They didn't play that well against Missouri State anyways. They gave up 42 points. So I'm going to take Purdue in this game. I think Purdue can be somewhat of a surprise team in the Big Ten after seeing their first 2 games. I thought they would lose to Ohio. In a normal year, they would have played a close game against Ohio, but they ran Ohio out of the water. So underrated game this week, LSU, Mississippi State. Mississippi State has come out the gates really hot. LSU has came out the gates really hot too. They've gave up, I think, maybe 7 points in total this year. Mississippi State, they hadn't really played anybody. Louisiana Tech. But I'll take LSU on the road. But I think this is going to be a real good game for both these SEC schools. I got Oregon and Wyoming on here. I got it just because I like watching Josh Allen and seeing what Wyoming does. I'll take Oregon for sure on the road, though. I think Oregon wins the game. Kentucky, South Carolina. I'll take South Carolina. Kentucky's still kind of mixing their quarterbacks around, having some issues there. They barely beat Eastern Kentucky last week. Drew Barker didn't look good in the game. I'll take South Carolina. They're a little bit more figured out, and their backbone is their defense, and I trust that a lot more than I trust Kentucky's defense. Kansas State, Vanderbilt. This is another game that, usually Vanderbilt or one of these teams usually loses an early game, and then it kind of ruins the undefeatedness of it. But they're both 2-2 or both 2-0. Vanderbilt has slaughtered whoever they played, and I was kind of low on Vanderbilt. I didn't think Vanderbilt was going to be good, just like they normally are every year. And Kansas State, I thought Kansas State would have a good year. I have Kansas State winning this game, but this is an SEC game. This is against the SEC team, and Vanderbilt has looked good this year, but I think Kansas State can win it. Georgia Tech, UCF, their offense is finally starting to look like like an Oregon type offense. Scott Frost is there, former offensive coordinator of Oregon. Georgia Tech, running that option game. I think Georgia Tech can win this game. After that first game of watching Georgia Tech, I like them a lot. Their personnel is a lot better than it's been in the last couple years. Arizona State, Texas Tech. This one was a real barn burner last year. This is one of those games between two teams that won't be anything nationally at the end of the year. They won't be ranked at the end of the year, but two Power 5 schools. And I'll take Tech to win the game. It's at Tech. Arizona State has not been impressive. Their defense is terrible. So game of the week, Clemson, Louisville. I for sure take Clemson in this game. Lamar Jackson will probably have a huge game. We'll probably do a lot with his legs. We'll do a lot through the air. We'll probably keep Louisville in the game, but I see Clemson winning this game pretty handily. It's really a no-brainer for me after getting to watch Clemson's defense last week. Their defense is just a step above some of the other defenses, and Louisville has too many holes and too many other spots. Lamar can't fill all of them. Texas, USC, I think USC is going to slaughter Texas. I think Texas will play better than they played week 1. They played good week 2, but I think at USC, I think USC really, really handles them. And then Ole Miss, Cal, these are two teams. Ole Miss has got a postseason ban, so they won't be doing anything. You don't got to worry about Ole Miss or nothing. They'll fall back to the back of the SEC once the SEC season starts. Cal's a team that I think I projected them going like 1-11. I didn't think Cal would be good this year. A new quarterback, new head coach. And they're actually 2-0. They won the game last week that I thought that they would win against Weber State, and then they beat North Carolina the week before. I didn't think they'd beat North Carolina. They did that, but I'll take Ole Miss to win the game on the road. And then another good game, Stanford, San Diego State. I think San Diego State can really give them hell, but I think Stanford's just too big in the trenches. I think they're going to run all over them. I think Stanford wins this game and gives San Diego State its only loss of the year.